In this video, we're going to talk about how to create a quiz on D2L, specifically a quiz using random selection questions. So the first thing you need to do is get your questions into your quiz. You can either create them in the quiz library or the question library by going to quizzes and then question library and creating your questions that way, which is a good idea because then you have this library of questions built up that you can use in multiple quizzes. Or you can go to quizzes, create a new quiz, and make your questions right within the quiz itself. Another way to do it is if you already have a bank of questions. So maybe your textbook provider has given you some questions that you can use to import to D2L. You're going to end up with most likely a CSV file that looks like this when you open an Excel. And you can actually, if you know what you're doing, edit the values of this CSV file, but it's pretty tricky stuff. If you don't know what you're doing, you can mess up your whole quiz just with one wrong letter in the wrong cell. But if your textbook publisher has given you a pre-written test question bank like this, you really shouldn't have to do anything other than import it in D2L. Finally, you can also import questions from another class. If you go to your edit course and then import, export, copy, you can import components which could include quiz or test questions from a previous class. So if you taught a class last semester, you can go to that class, do through the same process of edit course, and then import, export, copy. Only in this previous class, you could export components. So you could export the quiz questions, then in your new class, import the questions, as well as other components as well. In this video, though, what we're assuming you've already got some questions that you're going to use for your quiz. To make a new quiz, simply go to New Quiz. And we're going to call this a random selection quiz example. You can give it a category or a grade item if you want it to automatically be associated with a particular grade item. You can also allow auto export to grades, which means that as soon as students are done taking this quiz, it will export their scores to the gradebook automatically. You can assign rubrics that students know how they'll be assessed and other things as well. The important thing here, though, is layout questions. That's where you actually deal with the questions of this quiz. We're going to add edit questions. There's currently no questions in the quiz, so we can add edit questions and make a new true-false question. We can make a new multiple choice question, whatever we want to do. Again, if we do it this way, once we're in the quiz itself, if we make questions, then it still works just fine, but in terms of D2L best practices, it's probably a good idea to make your questions within a test question bank first and then import them into a given quiz. But for the purposes of this quiz, what we're going to do is create a new random section. And we're going to call this Asian countries. In this Asian countries question, then, we're going to import from this Asian countries test bank that I've already created. And I'll show you where that is. So I've created a bank of questions. There's these 5 questions about Asian countries. I'm going to import these into my Asian questions test section here. Now is where I decide how many of these questions are going to go to the students. So of these 5 questions, when a student takes them, I want them to have 3 of these questions, and we'll assign 1 point each, but you can change that as well. That means if you have students that are sitting next to each other in class and they're taking this question, or they're taking this quiz, or if you just want to introduce a random element into the quiz, you can do this by getting creating a section of questions and then using this new random section option when you go to a new quiz item to populate that question bank. So now students, when they take this quiz, they will be given 3 of these following 5 questions per attempt. I'm going to save that, and we'll be done. So this quiz that we're making here, this random selection quiz example, now has a section called Asian Countries Question. Choose 3 of 5. So how do we get these Asian countries questions in the first place? Well, if I go to Quizzes, Question Library, here is where I'm building up my question library. And here's my Asian countries questions. And this is a section, and in this section there are 5 questions. The same 5 questions that are being used to populate that other quiz. Once we're within our question library, we can create another new section. And this is where I said earlier it might be a good idea to populate your test question library first with all your questions that you want to do with your quiz or various quizzes, and then simply import them into the quiz itself. We'll do this again because we've got one more example here that we can run through. I've got another section of questions here in my question library called OSU information. If I click on that, we've got 4 OSU questions. So let's go back to my quizzes. And in this random selection quiz example, we'll edit this, lay out questions. And again, I can add a new question just by going new, true, false question, or multiple choice. So add a new question within the quiz. In this case, I'm going to do another random section. And we'll call it OSU questions. Save it. We're going to import from the OSU information. Use all those questions. And we want students to have 2 of them. Save that, and then we're done. So now this test, called Random Selection Example Quiz, has a total of 5 questions. Students are first going to be presented with 3 questions about Asian countries, and then 2 questions about OSU, a total of 5. The total number of optional questions that they have to choose from, or that are in this quiz, is 9. Because there's 5 total Asian country questions in my library and 4 total OSU questions. But it's going to only select 3 of these Asian ones and 2 of the OSU ones. So that's how you use random questions on your quiz. We wish it were a little easier than that, but as it stands now, that's how you do random sections, and hopefully they'll think of a less complicated way in the future.